Hello and welcome to everyone. Good afternoon and thank you for joining us today for our live webinar where we are looking at the strategic guide to 5G roaming. My name is John King. I am the Chief Commercial Officer at Kaleido Intelligence. It's a pleasure to have you all joining us today, and we're really looking forward to sharing, as always on Kaleido webinars, a wealth of new insights to help inform your strategic planning. So what we're going to do today is we'll quickly run through the agenda in a couple minutes. But before we do that, I'm going to give a quick introduction to the speakers that we have with us today. So we have Kenneth Hadet joining us from BICS and Nitin Bass from Kaleido, who will be sharing with us today. I'm going to invite each of you gentlemen to quickly unmute yourselves, and it'll be great if you're able to give just a quick background into your roles within your respective companies. Kenneth, can we start with yourself?
Thank you, John. I'm Kenneth, and I'm part of the product management and development team of BICS, and I'm responsible for solving operator obstacles, mainly in the 5G and VoLTE domain. So 5G standalone is a key value creator for operators, and I'm here to present the IPX view and how we can help operators enable 5G standalone roaming. Thank you.
Thanks, Kenneth. Thanks, Kenneth. Thanks, John. Great to be here. I'm Nitin Bass, one of the chief analysts here at Kaleido. I lead the research and strategy departments focusing on roaming and wholesale strategies. I'm also the author of the white paper we'll be publishing alongside this webinar. So yes, great to be here. We'll share some findings from our latest 5G roaming research, and as well as some insights from the white paper we'll be publishing with BICS shortly. So yeah, great to be here, and thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Yeah, we'll look forward to hearing from you both later on as we go through this session. So what we're going to do now is we're going to quickly have a look at the agenda and give ourselves a recap of the agenda for today. As Nitin said, there's a lot of new insight that we will be sharing with you today, stemming from the ongoing research that Kaleido does in the roaming sector, which is being published in a new white paper, which is being launched alongside this event. So if you're joining us today for this webinar, or if you're registered for it and watching this replay back, then congratulations. You will soon have access to this white paper as well. We'll share more on that further on through this webinar. So what we'll be doing is presenting latest insights from the ongoing research that Kaleido does that we see shaping 5G roaming. You're looking at SA and looking at NSA as well. As you can see, those trends, the requirements that we see from our operator surveys, growth projections as well from Kaleido's ongoing market sizing and forecasting. So that's one element, and we really want to help inform you through that, through the research that we do. And then it's also really important when we're talking about 5G roaming to get that hands-on view from actually what's going on the ground level with those who are working directly with the operators, helping them with the trials, etc. And that's where Kenneth's going to come in, and he's going to share with us just about, how, those conversations he's having, those real needs, how he sees that, I guess, rolling out when it comes to enabling, 5G roaming deployments and success as well. So we have a really nice, I would say, complement of insights that come from that side. And then, as you can see, we'll then have almost a summing up section where we present to you what we would call the key strategic critical success factors to consider if you as an operator are looking to deploy 5G SA roaming. And then, very importantly, at the end, we will have a live Q&A as well. And let me quickly share with you how you can provide, and submit your questions to us today, because we want to be hearing from as many of you as possible. On the right-hand side of your screen, you have a couple different options that you can expand. One is a Q&A. So on that, it should be at I think either the top or the bottom of your screen on the right-hand side. If you just expand that Q&A section, you'll be all set up by default to submit your questions to all panelists. Now, as we go through and as we share findings from Kaleido's ongoing research, our data projections, as Kenneth shares with you from what they see at BICS, please don't hold back. If there's a question that you have or you want more information on any of the points that we are covering today, please fire those questions away, send them to all panelists, and then during this Q&A section at the end, we will endeavour to get through as many of those as possible. And the rule that we always say on these webinars is, if it's something that you're thinking, then it's surely something that your peers are thinking as well. So don't hold back in giving us your feedback and your thoughts as we go. Okay, so in a moment, I'm going to hand over to Nitin. He's going to lead us in really showing what some of those latest insights are from Kaleido when it comes to 5G roaming. But firstly, as you can see, there is a new white paper that's being launched alongside this webinar. You're all going to have access to this white paper. The latest tomorrow, you'll be sent a direct URL where you can download it. And what this white paper is providing you, it's really taken some of those key findings that Kaleido sees from its ongoing research. So if you're familiar with Kaleido Intelligence, as I can see from the attendees, many of you are, then Kaleido is a research house that specializes within the roaming sector. So all year round, we're constantly doing research into areas that we see shaping the future of roaming. So obviously that includes areas such as 5G roaming, VoLTE roaming, IoT roaming, looking at monetization and BCE, looking at areas such as the security element as well. So bringing all these together, running surveys with operators as end users, lots of engagement with vendors as well, and really trying to bring everything together to help inform the industry, to help enable your roaming plans. So within this white paper, we're taking a lot of those insights that we see in terms of the needs from the industry, the best practices and approach to help you if you're looking at your roaming business model, just to understand, right, where should I be focusing? Where are the growth areas? What are the challenges? What should I be doing? Okay, so this white paper is going to be a really fantastic resource for you, free of charge. You can share it within, internally with your partners as well. So hopefully a really good resource to help you moving forward. Okay, and as we move on to the next section now, we're going to see some of those early findings as well. So it's my pleasure now to hand over to Nitin, who's going to lead us in some of the key insights we see when it comes to 5G roaming. So Nitin, over to you.
Thanks again, John. So yeah, I have a few slides today focusing on current market status of 5G roaming, latest operator views based on our market surveys that we've been conducting over the last few months, and then we'll summarize with some of the key essentials that's needed to prepare for 5G roaming, especially with the migration towards 5G standalone roaming. There is a greater focus amongst operators on 5G non-standalone, and how that's going to migrate to 5G standalone roaming, and what are the key essentials that will be needed to enable that successful migration is what we'll be looking at today. So jumping straight in, over the past 24 months, I would say, what we've seen around the world is mobile operators have accelerated their 5G strategies and roadmap, both from a domestic as well as international roaming perspective. I think we've seen around 225 to 230 operators in well over 90 countries who've launched commercial mobile 5G services nationwide. And this is up from, I think, just over 60 commercial networks in 2019 and 140 commercial networks in 2020. Now, in comparison, we're seeing well over 35 mobile operators in 20 plus country markets who've launched domestic 5G standalone networks, and Kaleido expects around 20 additional operators preparing for commercial launches over the next 8 to 12 months. Now, consumer adoption of 5G services is what's driving the domestic adoption of 5G. And in comparison, what we're seeing is 5G IoT is still at a nascent stage, and this can be attributed to multiple factors. You take the hardware availability, you take the cost of hardware, And most importantly, the continued lack of high volume use cases that demand the sort of connection density support or low latency support that 5G connectivity offers. Now, if you move to a roaming perspective, a 5G roaming essentially represents a significant opportunity for mobile operators, in terms of not just enabling new use cases, but also enriching existing services for consumers and enterprises alike. Now, from a 5G roaming perspective, you're looking at non-standalone roaming available in well over 50 country markets, both from an inbound and outbound perspective. But from a standalone perspective, it's still early days. We know some operators are currently testing and trialing the same, getting ready to launch. And when we conducted our 5G roaming survey earlier this year, where we surveyed 90 plus mobile operators from around the world. I think around 30 plus, I think 30 to 32% of mobile operators, or 34 rather, expect to launch 5G standalone roaming by the end of 2024. A couple of operators did say that they expected to launch it this year, but I think 2023 looks most likely to be the first year when 5G standalone roaming will be launched. We are in the process of running the survey again this year, so if you wish to participate, if you're a mobile operator want to participate and receive free insights from the survey, please do sign up to our Kaleido survey portal. Now, in comparison, as I mentioned, 5G NSA roaming, it's been prioritized by mobile operators. I think we're looking at, from the survey, we're looking at well over 80% of mobile operators who expect to have some sort of 5G NSA roaming services enabled by the end of 2025. Now, what needs to be considered here, I think we've been interviewing mobile operators, even at VAS, the recently concluded VAS in Cape Town. Kind of feedback that we've been getting was that there is a growing gap between operators of different sizes, especially in terms of the 5G investment and their technology roadmap. For example, there is a greater focus amongst those tier one operators to roll out 5G NSA and standalone networks nationwide. In comparison, smaller operators are saying that they are having to change the timescales for their 5G non-standalone rollout because of the impact of the pandemic, and that has had an impact on their priorities. They have had to change their priorities around a bit. How do we see this forward is what I would like to touch upon on the next slide. Just moving on to the next slide, please, John. Yeah. So our predictions for 5G roaming adoption is that it will be primarily driven by the consumers. We are forecasting the number of 5G roamers to exceed 640 million by 2027. And this is well over 100% average annual growth, over the next 5 years. Now, given the increasing number of 5G non-standard roaming agreements in place and adoption by mobile users in country markets, for example, we're seeing, and I'm sure everybody you witnessing that in your local markets as well, the adoption, the speed, the pace at which consumers are adopting 5G compared to 4G is at much faster pace. So we are estimating 5G roaming adoption to reach just over 60% of the active roamer population by the end of 2027. Now moving on to the next slide. So what we're seeing right now is travel recovering. Travel recovery is beginning to peak, except barring a couple of markets such as China and Eastern European country corridors. We see enterprises accelerating their IoT strategies. And what this has meant is that this is the time to address the surge in roaming traffic, in international network usage, as well as prepare to address any new roaming use cases for the future. Now, IPX vendors, mobile operators, they're already witnessing data roaming usage 2 to 3 times higher than previous years. And this migration towards 5G means that investment into 5G roaming, investment in a 5G core, increasing the capacity, increasing the IPX capacity, and focusing on enhancing the roaming experience and enabling those value-added services for 5G roaming is in fact the biggest obstacle or rather the more immediate requirement for the mobile operators. When we conducted the survey earlier this year, consistent, as you can see from the chart, consistent and guaranteed quality of service, providing premium experiences was the #1 expectation for 5G roaming amongst operators, and this was also flagged by the operators we interviewed at the VAS event earlier this year, and it was very evident from the feedback that quality of service is kind of observed to be consistently observed to be a challenge by the operators. It is a complex criterion that's included in all contracts, that's included everywhere, but it's not quite monitored, or sometimes it's largely absent from the roaming agreements or deployment. So there was a kind of discussion around how operators and vendors must come together to prioritize this quality of service, especially when you're enabling those new use cases, new networks, slices and all those things. Quality of services become much more important. Now, in comparison, the other two top expectations from the operators were on how to enable those 5G standalone use cases. You keep talking about all the 5G roaming use cases. What are those? How to enable them? Who can help them enable those 5G standalone use cases? And I mentioned network slicing, a hot topic that's widely discussed as well. Still early days, but how to manage those slices, those small networks. So these were also part of the top 3 expectations from the operators. Moving on to the next slide. So as I mentioned at the start, we'll go through some of the essentials that operators must consider when launching 5G roaming. I mean, when you say 5G roaming, these are the critical items we believe must be in the forefront of MNO planning and roadmap. And now, firstly, and surprisingly as well, VoLTE roaming. Now, we all understand VoLTE roaming is a key topic. We've been discussing VoLTE roaming for quite some time now. And with operators now focusing on 5G rollout, and 4G is rapidly becoming mainstream, VoLTE has become the #1 criteria, essential. It has become essential for mobile operators worldwide, and we all understand that they will need to roll out VoLTE networks more urgently, as in 5G standalone network scenario, only fallback to a VoLTE networks is supported. So the attitude towards VoLTE roaming is evidently changing. Again, we did our annual wholesale survey, which was conducted in Q3 2022. The VoLTE roaming testing in assurance was found to be the #1 most important technical requirement from a roaming perspective for mobile operators in 2022. And what this means is, and what we are trying to picture here is the need for operators to have a fully defined VoLTE roaming implementation strategy, as well as a functional testing strategy in place, not just for VoLTE roaming, but also for the various fallback scenarios, various interworking services. So bringing all that together, I think there is a real need for VoLTE roaming amongst operators. It's being prioritized by many of the operators that we talk to. It just points us towards 2022 to 2024 being the years when VoLTE roaming finally takes off in most parts of the world. But the challenge there, then, I would say, is to scale up those number of agreements, the number of VoLTE roaming agreements in place, and have a good coverage of the market worldwide. Now, next up, moving on to the next slide, please, John. We have BCE. So monetization of 5G roaming services was the #1 reason for mobile operators to migrate from TAP to BCE. apart from monetization of IoT devices. And this was based on our BCE survey, which was conducted earlier this year as well in Q2 2022. Now, compared to the traditional billing, charging, and settlement mechanisms, BCE introduced that range of automated, or rather flexible, wholesale charging and settlement models, enabling the operators to manage the successful expansion of their 5G and IoT roaming footprints, and move away from simply charging based on megabytes or minute basis. And this becomes more important in a 5G environment, right? So 5G's service-based architecture is designed to support converged charging and billing, and to enable the definition of events and sessions, which then can be charged at, I would say, highly granular levels. And then you bring in slicing back again, and you have those dedicated network slices with its own features and characteristics tailored to the connections or the devices. BCE once again plays an important role here. Quickly moving on to the next slide. So as I mentioned, when you talk about 5G roaming, 5G non-standard roaming is being rolled out faster amongst operators. And as I mentioned earlier on, from a data roaming perspective, from a data demand perspective, we are already seeing high volumes of data roaming traffic, and it's like we spoke to nearly all the IPX providers, and every one of them are witnessing between 2 to 3 times traffic during the summer compared to the previous years being reported. So launching 5G non-standard roaming is an effective solution to manage and support these increasing data demands, and it's kind of, Kenneth, you can correct me if I'm wrong at the later stage, but it's easy to roll out, comparatively, it's easier to roll out 5G non-standard roaming without any new roaming agreements, but signing a new launch letter and performing a new IREG test. In comparison, when you're talking about 5G standalone roaming, it requires comprehensive testing, trials, optimization prior to deployment, and you need to ensure that there's reliable, secure interconnect services, signaling protocols, maintaining quality. So the requirements while launching 5G standalone and 5G non-standard roaming are different from an operator's perspective. I'm sure Kenneth will expand on this further, but these are kind of the features, or rather technical requirements that operators need to be aware of, or they consider prior to planning 5G roaming launch. We discuss much more about these requirements in the white paper. Now, moving on to the next slide, I think I did touch upon it a couple of times, but again, network slicing, a very hot topic, widely discussed. I would say we're still some way away from slicing, but we know for a fact that it is being actively tested or trialed by some operators. There are different roaming scenarios by which slicing can be extended to, as I mentioned earlier on, several, to meet the services and applications while roaming, to ensure that level of service continuity. Now, these operators need to be need to plan for enabling these new business models based on network slicing, and supporting and monitoring these network slicing functions in a roaming context was one of the top 3 requirements from the operators while launching 5G standalone roaming. Now, as I mentioned, this is long term. This is indeed long term, but considering the 5G roaming objectives, I think operators will need to be ready to implement slicing, and this gives them that opportunity to focus on higher value use cases, to optimize various slicing models, but at the same time maintaining the need to maintain the end-to-end integrity and management of those slices, and at the same time extend these services to all kinds of customers, including not just consumers, but also the enterprises and businesses across different multiple industry verticals. So moving on to the next slide, and before I hand over to Kenneth, I think it is it is evident, it is clear that roaming revenues in a I don't want to say post-pandemic world, but I'll just say it anyway. In a post-pandemic world, we expect it to significantly improve, and with the travel recovery, with the data usage, increase in data usage, I think it's a good sign for the roaming industry, and going forward, as per our annual wholesale survey that we did, well over 50% of the participants were of the opinion that 5G non-standalone roaming use cases would be the primary or would be the critical revenue driver over the next 3 years or so. Now, what this highlights is the more immediate focus for mobile operators around 5G and the need to focus on 5G non-standalone launches in order to meet those ever increasing expectations of consumers while traveling. Now that they have experienced how 5G is at their home in their local markets, they want that their expectations while traveling to be met by the operators. Now, what we believe that in 2023 we will continue to see more 5G standalone rollouts happening in domestic markets, but at the same time 5G non-standalone will continue to grow faster, and 5G standalone then coming in to target the next level of use cases and the consumer base. So this is what we believe will happen in the short term. So I'll pause now and I'll hand over to Kenneth to do and John to take this forward.
Thank you very much, Nitin. And before we pass over to Kenneth, just because I see a few people coming in late, just a quick reminder that we really want to get your questions as we share this information. You've probably seen there's a lot of information that we're sharing with you in today's session. We've not even started with Kenneth's part, and he's got a lot to share as well. So again, please do keep your questions coming. To submit your questions, again, your right-hand column, expand your Q&A section, and then type your questions away to all panelists. I'm going to very quickly take one from Thomas that came in as well during Nitin's session, because he said, can you give indications on sample sizes to some of these surveys? And we're not referencing a single survey within what we've shared from Nitin here. There's multiple surveys that we run. So Kaleido runs surveys with operator end users throughout the year. So we did a 5G survey earlier in the year. We did one specifically looking at BCE and monetization strategies. We did one looking at wholesale roaming strategies, one looking at VoLTE roaming strategies. Now, these surveys typically have around 100 plus survey respondents spread over multi-regionals. And I think minimal numbers that we accept for our surveys are somewhere between 60 or 70 plus. Okay, so that's why we're not saying a single number there, because there's a lot that we're bringing into the equation here from the different surveys we do through the year. So I hope that helps, and do follow up with me, Thomas, afterwards. I will share with you all the numbers from all the surveys at your leisure. Okay, but now let's move on to the next section. And so Nitin has set the scene very much from what we see from Kaleido's ongoing research. And now it's really good, because now we get to get the view from Kenneth, working at BICS, who are really there at the ground level, helping operators as they're looking to implement 5G roaming. So, Kenneth, I'll hand over to yourself.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Nitin, for providing the excellent insights. Indeed, as an IPX provider, we sit very close to the mobile network operators, and we see the same trends happening as well. So when we speak about 5G roaming, we indeed see an increase. We see a lot of traction with regards to 5G roaming. Now, I will be very happy to talk about the success of operators and what operators expect to make 5G as a roaming, to make it a success story. So perhaps you can jump to the next slide, John. Yeah. So first of all, what is success, and how do you make a success of 5G roaming? Before answering this question, it's instrumental to look at the operator challenges today. Today, operators, they are confronted with various challenges. They are confronted with a new mobility generation, and they have a major focus on customer satisfaction. How to keep a customer happy and also how to attract new customers. In order to realize this, the operators need to accelerate their 5G rollout. So let's have a look at 5G and how the 5G technology is evolving. So operators today, they are actively investing. Yeah, if you can go back, John. Yeah. So operators today are actively investing in 5G, and they are facing a new protocol stack with new network elements. It's in essence an IT-based ecosystem. The advantage of an IT-based ecosystem is that it can scale very well, and it can introduce new type of services. So this results in a very scalable 5G system, which can easily be upgraded or downgraded with new services that can be offered, such as slicing. Operators who are already investing in 5G standalone, they are extremely reliant on IT resources. So telco resources are being trained to become IT resources. So let's have a look at the second challenge. 5G is also secure by design, at least from a roaming perspective. In order to achieve this, a SEP network function is required. The SEP is an abbreviation of Secure Edge Protection Proxy, and it is in fact the gateway to exchange your signaling traffic with your roaming partners. All the signaling traffic is by default encrypted. This is achieved through the exchange of certificates, another element of complexity which operators don't like. With the inclusion of encryption, several operators are questioning on how to retain the value-added services, and rightfully. Let's have a look at the third challenge, the roaming and the footprint management. So today, operators, they want to downscale their operations. They don't want to upscale it. However, with the inclusion of another mobility generation, this becomes very difficult to manage. So that's another key problem which operators are having today. Then operators are also facing a fourth challenge, the BCE, which is being referred to as the billing and charging evolution, and which is mandatory for 5G. And although BCE is not a new thing, it has not gotten the traction it deserves. With 5G standalone and the introduction of new type of services, such as slicing, BCE is mandatory. So let's jump to the next slide and let's have a look why 5G standalone is different. So as you may all very well realize, 5G is deployed in two phases. The first stage is called 5G non-standalone. So here, 5G radio is deployed by operators. However, the 4G mobile core remains relevant. You could say it's a partial 5G deployment, which enables higher bandwidth for the subscribers up to a certain extent. Today, we estimate that around 230 operators are in this phase, meaning 230 operators have a commercial 5G deployment, leveraging 5G non-standalone, promising 5G data speeds to their subscribers. From a roaming perspective, as Nitin already mentioned, this is very easy to enable. You just sign a launch letter with your roaming partner and you test the data speed with your roaming partners as well. The next phase for those 230 operators is 5G standalone. If we look at where the industry sits today, 26 mobile network operators are in this phase. They have a commercial 5G standalone deployment today with subscribers. With 5G standalone, you can offer a whole new range of services, spanning from slicing, dynamic services, ultra reliable low latency, location tracking, and much more. This requires, of course, end-to-end 5G, but not only 5G radio, but also a 5G core network. So that's under the definition of 5G standalone. And if you look at the roaming context in 5G standalone, a SEP on the technical side is required. This SEP introduces a new security dimension, and as such is creating extra complexity for the certificate management. On the commercial side, we have the BCE, the billing and charging evolution, and both the SEP and the BCE are mandatory roaming elements in order to establish 5G standalone roaming. So if we look at the next slide, we can have a look at the roaming deployment model, how it is how it is described today and how an IPX provider can enable your 5G standalone roaming. So at the right hand of this presentation, we have you, a mobile network operator, which is 5G standalone capable. And at the left hand side of the slide, we have your roaming partner, also 5G standalone capable. In the center blue box, we have an IPX provider such as ourselves, BICS, offering you a suite of 5G standalone roaming services, resolving the complexity and enabling value for your customers. Looking at the center, you can see the key value proposition of an IPX provider, resolving your main obstacle. The first one is the hosted SEP. The hosted SEP is a fully defined and integrated IPX function, fully supported and approved by the GSMA. Through the hosted SEP, you'll be able to enable your bilateral signaling agreements. Very important is that this happens as efficient as possible, without the obstacle of roaming partner certificates. This security complexity can be outsourced as well to the IPX provider, bringing you a very smooth technical enablement. Secondly, we also have the service hub, currently still under definition at the GSMA. I believe the service hub will become an extremely important function. It is an aggregator function which can take away the overhead in the signaling enablement and also the roaming relation enablement. We believe the service hub will play a major role in 5G standalone roaming. Why is this? So 5G will bring a lot more players to the roaming ecosystem, going from 1,000 operators to tens of thousands of players, including private networks. To make things manageable, you will need to rely on a service hub. The service hub, again, I cannot stress the importance of it. It is extremely important to keep roaming manageable. Still under definition by the GSMA, still to be concluded on this regard. Likewise, we also have the value-added services such as advanced analytics, security detection, fraud, steering of roaming. These are very important contributed services which can be offered in both a hosted SEP as well as in a service hub model. Then we also have roaming footprint management services, which will also be of critical importance under the umbrella of keeping roaming manageable. And then last but not least, we also have the billing and charging framework, the BCE. Although already a known component, it remains key in order to achieve 5G standalone roaming. So let's jump to the next slide. And then let's have a look at how you can start 5G as a roaming from an operator perspective. How do you tackle it? So today, 26 operators have a commercial 5G standalone deployment. And some of those 26 operators, they are already looking to enable 5G standalone roaming. Today, operators, they are having issues in finding a 5G standalone roaming partner. Some of their network suppliers are not ready yet with regards to the roaming network elements. And those operators, they also need assistance with regards to the 5G as a roaming rollout. They need somebody to guide them, to steer them in order to enable 5G as a roaming. So what we as an IPX provider do and what we offer to the operators is a 5G standalone test lab and a trial community. It's in fact a sandbox environment where you as an operator, you can test, you can acquire and share expertise in rolling out your first 5G standalone roaming agreement. And you as an operator, you can be part of the first movers community. As an IPX, we will help you, of course, in facilitating the implementation, testing, and sharing of the knowledge. So let's jump to the next slide and let's have a look at how this will happen in practice. So if you look at the drawing at the right, you can see the 5G standalone trial community. It is a community where operators and private networks are jointly connected and where they can test and trial 5G as a roaming. Likewise, this community is supported with a 5G as a lab. So This basically means that you as an operator, you can validate your 5G standalone roaming readiness, not only with the community, but also on the IPX provider 5G standalone lab. So you may, for example, have a use case to enable 5G as a roaming. You may have a use case to do slicing, or you may have a use case to do regional or local breakout. All of those things, they can be facilitated in the 5G standalone trial community. So you as an operator, you can get in early and trial 5G standalone roaming with early adopters. You can validate your roaming readiness, even if your network vendor is not yet ready. Then you can leverage the hosted SEP in order to achieve 5G as a roaming, while of course being guided by the roaming experts. So if we go to the next slide, what we, BICS as an IPX provider, offer you, we offer you an acceleration for your 5G standalone roaming rollout. So basically, we invite operators to join the community, to join the trial community where you can test and trial 5G standalone roaming. You can validate your 5G standalone roaming readiness on the community. You can validate it on the lab. You can also leverage the existing network functions, such as the hosted SEP and in a later stage, the service hub as well. And this allows you to accelerate 5G standalone roaming. You can go live quicker with this approach. So we believe that this acceleration phase, it can help you to go quicker and to have a commercial ready 5G as a roaming deployment. Of course, there as an IPX provider, we will help you in solving the obstacles. You can leverage the hosted SEP. You can leverage the, or we will help you in the technical enablement of the 5G standalone roaming partners. There are also roaming and footprint management services. And of course, we have the commercial framework, the BCE. So we as BICS, we are very excited about this 5G standalone roaming opportunity. And we believe that we can contribute to the operator success story. So on this note, I give the word back to you, John and Nitin.
Thank you, Kenneth. I think that's a perfect sign off. We also from our end, I think, echo the excitement that you share for 5G roaming moving forward. Right, thank you so much for sharing. So we've got some great audience questions coming in, which is fantastic. So I see some from Javier, from VJ, from Tolilope. So that's fantastic. We're going to aim to get to your questions. Either maybe they'll get covered in the next section or in the Q&A at the end. Again, please keep submitting them through the Q&A drop down on your right-hand column, and then we can get to as many as we can. We'll move to the Q&As in a moment, but firstly, I'm going to hand back to Nitin. And Nitin, I guess then it's for you to really, I guess, give that summary of as we can see, the critical success factors. So let me pass it back to you.
Yeah, and Vijay, I think I'll answer your question now, and I think it kind of acts as a good intro to this section as well. So I think 5G roaming represents a great opportunity for mobile operators around the world in the long term, and you asked about revenue. So by 2027, I think the roaming revenues from the 5G roaming revenues from the consumer connections as well as the IoT use cases will account for, I would say, just over 45% or close to 45% of the total revenues, total roaming revenues, both from an inbound, like a wholesale and retail perspective. And this will primarily be driven by consumer connections and roaming traffic. And what this means is it will approach close to 30 billion, 28 billion in revenues for operators by then. So that's the opportunity, and we see the global wholesale roaming space continue to evolve. Well, the retail as well. Although we do think that there is a gap between the wholesale and wholesale roaming and retail roaming spaces, but that's a conversation for another time. But what we're trying to portray here is that the industry is well on track to complete a full recovery from the adverse effects of the pandemic, and right now is an excellent time to make significant investments into next generation roaming services. So having the capability to address the requirements from a 5G roaming perspective, having the capability to address the complexity that comes as a part of all this is of utmost importance, and that means right now is the time to have a 5G roaming, or rather 5G standalone roaming strategy in place. Now, um, security keeps coming up as one of the top priority for mobile operators, ensuring that security levels. Kenneth mentioned 5G standard roaming comes with additional security implementation and execution. But one of the key requirements while rolling out 5G standard roaming is the implementation of SEP and other new functions such as SEP and others. So this is of importance to the mobile operators. And a 5G standalone roaming, in the long term will enable many use cases, the low latency use cases. So in addition to all this, focusing on regional and local breakout to support those low latency roaming needs will become important. And this will enable specific traffic profiles to be differentiated and further optimize 5G roaming. And as we mentioned earlier, network slicing will become a crucial part of 5G roaming going forward, and this will enable or require advanced automation capabilities. This is still at an early stage, as Kenneth mentioned. The groundwork for the commercialization of all this is happening, and we expect further standardization to happen going forward, which will then enable operators to offer a guaranteed service and improved latency for those kind of use cases. Now, we ended up, Kenneth and I ended up talking about BCE towards at the end of our slides. So one of the key recommendations is that operators must not be reluctant to begin the migration to BCE. It's still slow in the industry. We understand that, and kind of the feedback that we get, but they should not be reluctant to begin the migration to BCE and wait until they implement 5G standalone. And for many players in developing markets will not be until, I would say, 2026 or 2027 at the earliest. So in summary, these are the fundamentals that need to be looked into while planning your 5G roaming strategy. And I think I'll wrap this up now. You can read more on these from the white paper, and I would invite all of you to access more of our survey and research content from our website. But I'll now hand it back to John to take some audience questions.
Thank you very much, Nitin. And yeah, just a quick reminder there to you all as well. So the white paper that's behind these insights will be coming your way shortly after this webinar, and you will also receive a copy of the webinar recording once available. So don't worry, we'll be sending all of these insights your way. But right, I'm aware that we've gone a tad over time, but we always leave a buffer in here. So hopefully you can stay with us before your next meetings, and let's get through some of your questions, because it's fantastic to see them coming in. So please do keep them coming. Kenneth, I am going to put you on the spot with some of these that have come in. Okay, so let's get your feedback on a few of these. So firstly, question from Javier. Okay, he says, although this is on 5G roaming, first phases will be built on VoLTE roaming. Is this correct? If so, what is the status of VoLTE roaming? Seems to be a blocker as of today. Kenneth, over to you for the response.
Yes, thank you, John. Indeed, I can take this question. Now, indeed, it's true. If we speak about VoLTE roaming is indeed a requirement prior going to 5G. Why is this? Because the VoLTE is based on packet switched voice, which requires an IMS. And of course, you need that same IMS as well in 5G. So it's partially related indeed to VoLTE roaming as well, because you need this IMS voice component in order to proceed in your 5G rollout. I hope this answers the question.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Kenneth. But stay with me, because I'm keeping you on the spotlight. So let's now. There's a couple of questions, that we've had. In fact, there's a whole host of questions that we've had from Tolupe. And if we don't get responses to you for all of them, don't worry, we will follow up with you after the webinar. But Kenneth, one for you. It's asked, is SEP the signal in for 5G service?
Yeah, actually, the SEP, you should more see it as a network function, a network element which is mandatory for an operator to achieve 5G standalone signaling. So you will have two components. One is the SEP, the secure edge protection proxy, sitting at the edge of your network. And then you have the 5G standalone signaling, which is in essence a service being offered by IPX providers where all the signaling can be exchanged between yourself and your roaming partners. So it's a 5G service indeed, but it's complementary to the signaling service as we have it today.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that. A couple more that I'm going to quickly send you. So this one from Daniel. Okay, thank you, Daniel, for your question. So okay, Kenneth, I'll keep you in the spotlight for this one. So Daniel says, you mentioned some of the clear advantages of using a hosted SEP, especially in terms of speed to go live. Are there any drawbacks to this? What benefits are there for operators hosting their own SEP instead?
Yeah, exactly. And this is, in fact, a very good question. So if we speak about the SEP, and indeed, as Daniel mentioned, indeed, it can improve your go live date. You can go a lot quicker. You don't need to rely on your network supplier. You can go fast. You can go with a very fast 5G standalone roaming deployment. Next to this, the hosted SEP also includes the ease, let's say, to enable your 5G standalone signaling relations. As you may recall, 5G standalone roaming creates a lot of complexity on the security layer. You need to exchange certificates with each of your roaming partners. You need to do this on a yearly basis because the certificate expires. So all of this is creating a huge overhead. And through the hosted SEP, we will reduce this overhead and we will also take care of the security component. So it's not only a hosted SEP network element, but we will also take care of this technical complexity, which is introduced by the security dimension.
And this one, I saw this one, I thought, Kenneth will like this one. This is from Rafi. And it's specific to BICS and BICS Lab. And he asks, when is BICS Lab? When is it going to be ready for tests?
Yeah. Wow, a lot of questions. Now, if we speak about the BICS Lab, so the BICS Lab is already live for 1 year and a half. So we welcome operators to validate their 5G standalone roaming situation on the BICS Lab. Next to the BICS Lab, we also have the community where we encourage you to also test with roaming partners. So it's a bit of a dual approach. How you should go for 5G as a roaming, you should first test with, or you should test on the community, but likewise, you can also validate your roaming use cases on the BICS 5G standalone lab. So it is already there, guys. You just need to reach out.
Perfect. All right. John, we're going to take one more question. But you know what, Kenneth? I'm going to relieve you of fielding it because I've just put you on about 4 or 5 back-to-back. So thank you very much for that. Nitin, I'm going to come to you for the last one. This one's from Michelle, and this is about use cases, right? So again, I don't know if this is, you might have covered this a bit already, or you might want to just go back to it. So what roaming use cases will 5G SA support? I know that's one that we get asked fairly often. And within that, she said also, what about voice and messaging here?
Yeah, great. Yay, I get one. So yeah, I think there's someone else asked the same question as well. I think it will depend on what the 5G operators will aim to address initially. For example, from a consumer perspective, it will be enhanced mobile broadband services related to 4K, 8K videos, or there is an increasing demand for AR, VR applications. Suddenly, we've been doing these surveys since 2019, and every year we see a lot of interest from operators on industrial applications, on automotive services. But this year we saw an increase in interest for AR VR applications as well, possibly an impact of metaverse. But what drives these use cases will be based on the increase in service quality and bandwidth afforded by 5G, especially for those use cases beyond the consumer sector within key IoT verticals. But in the short term, we believe those IoT and roaming use cases will continue to remain in a nascent stage. As I think I mentioned this at the start of the presentations, and you know, we'll have to wait until maybe 3 to 5 years to see those critical mass of IoT devices demanding those sort of full 5G roaming services going forward. So I would say that it will take another 3 to 5 years for M2M 5G M2M roaming to take off. But by then it will possibly be around 25% of the total 5G roaming connections. Now, to answer the question, John, the consumer opportunities there now, you know, but from an IoT perspective, I think the bulk of these use cases will be within the automotive, security, and industrial sectors, where we see not just bandwidth application, but also the low latency services will benefit from 5G and can be safely or can be monetized by those operators.
Perfect.
But it is the right time to plan for all of this.
Thank you very much, Nitin. Okay, we're going to have to draw it to a close there. For those of you whose questions that we have not got to, so I see another one from Rafi, from Eugene, from Matea. Do not worry, we will be following up with you and for all outstanding questions after the webinar. And a reminder for those of you still with us, again, the white paper and a link where you can download that will be coming your way either late today or tomorrow, so you can access that white paper. And of course, I know I can speak for Nitin and Kenneth as well, where I'm saying if there are then any new questions that are stimulated as you read that white paper or other discussions that you want to have, please do not hesitate to get in touch with us. This is all about the industry moving forward as a whole, right? And in that regard, we're here ready to help each other and have those conversations. But on that note, we will draw it to a close today. So Kenneth and Nitin, guys, thank you so much for taking the time to share the insights. I, for one, very much enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.